Well, good morning, everyone. On behalf of One Acadiana, we're excited to be here today. Today we begin a new year of lessons from the corner office. And for those of you that are joining us here for the first time, this series features leaders in our industry from our own backyard and offer a behind-the-scenes look at what it takes to thrive in our marketplace, a beautiful place that we live here in Acadiana. Our daily activities sometimes keep us very busy and prohibit us from learning these compelling stories of these leaders that reside and lead great companies in our area. So this is an opportunity for us to get to know a little bit closer who they are and how they run their organizations. The event brings some stories to light that folks who know them best tell them to us so that we can appreciate their life in Acadiana. It's truly my pleasure today to welcome Al Gonsoulin, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of PHI. But before we begin today, I'd like to pause a second to give special thanks to the One Acadiana staff, and in particular to Alex Lazard for the production of this event. A lot of work goes on in the background to putting this together. So Alex, thank you very much for all the details. So without further ado, we're going to start off, and Al, welcome again. Glad you're joining us. And hopefully you could start off with giving us a brief history of PHI and how you got your start with PHI.
Well, you know, PHI has been a part of Lafayette since 1949. So we've been in business, 68 years now in the area, and a presence in the area. My involvement as a background, you know, I'd always been around PHI because I've been in the service business in and around Louisiana for a long time, as well as internationally. But I got involved in 2001 when I got a phone call from a good friend of mine who said, Al, you need to be in the helicopter business. And I had just sold a previous company that I had, and I declined initially, and then he kept beating on me, I guess is the best word. My wife hasn't forgiven him yet. So hence I bought out the Suggs family, which was a controlling interest at that time, and really found a lot of good people, great opportunities, but a poorly run company that was on the verge of bankruptcy. So we made a concerted effort over the period to restructure it and to expand our horizons. And we'll get into a little more detail.
So PHI, a publicly traded company in a small community like Acadiana, help us understand, what do you see some of the challenges running a publicly traded company in a small community like Acadiana are?
You know, it's an interesting circumstance because I'm from this area, so I'm very biased. You have great people, great work ethic. With communication nowadays, we should be able to locate a public traded company or any company in a small area and be effective. But there are other factors on the outside of that that really control it. So if you look at the current situation where we are from a growth profile, the biggest thing that affects us, and we'll get into that a little more detail as we go along, for growth, not only is the industry cycles, but it's also attracting the right talent into the company at levels to expand and manage it appropriately.
Yeah, so PHI has been around for many, many years, back to the 1940s, is that right?
49.
Yeah, and has certainly seen some tumultuous times, up and down, boom and bust. So how does the oil and gas boom play a role in the growth or the expansion of PHI in your tenure?
Well, the oil and gas business has always been cyclical in nature. So having been through many of these cycles, when I got involved in PHI, we diversified to where about 40–50% of our revenue now comes from Air Medical, which operates around the country and some internationally, to give us a different base. And then you really have to be in a position to read the downturn, which is very difficult. And cycles are painful because the hardest thing to do is lay people off. And for example, in this last cycle, and it's a good education for everyone, only because I've been through this so many times, we started downsizing what we were doing in late 14 and staged into early retirement programs, which as a public company, most of your investors don't like it because it costs money. But people are very important to me and PHI. And we had people that we offered retirement packages to that had been with the company 35, 45 years, which was only the right thing to do. So in 15 and 16, we staged through that. Then unfortunately in 17, it lasted longer than certainly I thought, we thought. And then we had to get into laying people off. And that's the painful part of the process. And so it affects communities, and you're not going to change the mechanism in the industry. The major companies are public companies, so they run to markets. What I mean is they expand their activities to market and oil price. And then when it downturns, here comes the layoffs, both internally and with service companies. And of course, Lafayette has evolved into a service center for the industry. And although deep water has very long legs, it's when you go through these periods, you got a significant impact on the community.
Yeah. So, you know, we go through this challenging time, and certainly everybody understands running their organizations, challenges present opportunities. So when you look ahead 10, 15 years into the future, what would you say are the biggest opportunities for us in Acadiana?
Well, again, I go back to the workforce. And it's a wonderful area to live in. Of course, like I said earlier, I'm biased. I happen to live in Texas because I married a Texan. I have no choice. And I'm sure most of y'all will understand that. But when you look at the potential here, it's the workforce. It's the people, it's the culture. I had a conversation with the guy that runs Bell Helicopter yesterday about their facility and what they're doing. And I know back when they were attracted here because we had sold a division to them at a time that I told them then, I said, the one thing you're going to be impressed with is the workforce. It's non-union, it's very dedicated, it's long-term, and this is the attractiveness of this area. Then there are monumental shortcomings, though. We got to diversify the area. We meaning we Acadiana, everybody in the room. And you got to get off the industry, and you got to go a manufacturing base doing different things. One big drawback to all that process that comes up time and time again is education. And that impacts the area tremendously.
Absolutely. You know, one of the things in getting to know Al a little bit closer and preparing for this, it was very interesting to learn about his passion for running an efficient organization. And when you're trying to run an organization like PHI in a competitive area, talk a little bit about, you know, how some of the industries are seeing a rise in automation of their workforce and their internal processes. Does this have an impact on the transportation services that PHI is offering?
Well, very much so, and really it's the technological side of aircraft operations and how we handle and manage the passenger input and to create a different environment from the past. And that we're advancing pretty aggressively now.
Yeah, so, you know, as leaders in running businesses, you always need to be looking to the future. How do you see PHI changing in the future to stay ahead of the competition?
Well, again, we have to come up with a novel approach to moving passengers. And we're not going to be able to do it the old way in oil and gas end. And the aeronautical side of the business is similar in a way, but it has a lot of complexities that continues to change. So we have to be ahead of the curve in that. I feel on the technological side in oil and gas, we're ahead of the curve. We are considered the safest helicopter operator in both industries in the world. And that's because of the hard work of the people that we have. We got a very good group of people, very consistent, very hard working. But we got to change what we're doing. So we're in the process of doing that.
Yeah, so culture in an organization and mixing it with the strong work ethic that we have here in Acadiana is something that we often hear as a plus for our environment. So tell us a little bit about the culture of PHI and how do you help a new employee understand the culture of the organization, and how do you see and spot talent, leadership talent, in growing young people up through your organization? Because you do have quite a few people that have been with your organization for a number of years.
Well, we're at a transition point in PHI, and you know, it's very important for older people, myself especially, to clearly understand you have to give young people a chance. So you try and work and pick the people who have the drive to succeed and put them in an area of responsibility and give them a chance. And with that, we have a culture that's aligned to safety. One of our programs is called Destination Zero. I mean, it's an important process of every job level in the company. That's to work safe each day. And that is kind of a one day at a time function. You got to focus on that day and work safe for that period. But when you look at young people and you give them a chance, because we're in that transition, including me, you know, I have a replacement in place. Everybody should have a replacement in place. And that's what you really want to, I certainly, when I step out of PHI, want to leave an environment that we have a staff that can carry on from there without a bump in the road.
So going in a little bit deeper into that, keeping young people in today's workforce excited and thinking innovatively and staying motivated. Are there any other special programs that you see that leaders are having to implement to keep the young workforce?
Well, you know, you can work with different training programs like Dale Carnegie and others to give them a basic, because a lot of people haven't been exposed. And the important thing that I'm really concerned about younger people moving forward, including my kids and grandkids, is the lack of social interaction, you know. The internet, the cell phones, the process, because the key aspect is going to always, in my mind, and I may be a dinosaur, is going to be dealing with people. I really owe my success to good common sense and the ability to read a person pretty quickly. And you can only do that face to face.
Yeah, it's a big challenge in our workforce today with the distractions. Let's shift it a little bit and talk a little bit about Acadiana and our community. What do you see as the biggest opportunities for our state and Acadiana as we sit today in our current business environment?
Well, we have some, you know, as I mentioned earlier, some tremendous challenges, but the greatest asset here is the workforce. And it's a non-union workforce. And that's a great selling point, and they can be trained. So we have to work, and that's why, you know, I'm involved in One Acadiana. we have to work to get the area to work together as this organization has done, and get outside businesses in the area. Because once they locate here, the key aspect in a lot of those situations is a good, stable workforce, and another important point is a non-union workforce. And that's the greatest asset we have here. But we got to diversify off of the platform that we're on now.
So diversification, any thoughts about opportunities that we need to be thinking about down the road?
Well, from like our side of the business, we were able to attract flight safety here and Bell Helicopters. You know, they've got a couple locations, and we need to attract other manufacturers into the area, into all the parish area.
Yeah, there's talk about aviation training classes being implemented both at, I believe at SLCC, if I'm not mistaken. Right. Do you see that as an opportunity to help your industry, the aviation industry, and what it can do for the future of Acadiana?
All those type schools will help, and all the type trade schools will help. Because again, we've got an industry, everybody that's in our particular business has an aging workforce. They need to be replaced.
Yeah, so we have many young people with us here today and in the community. What advice would you have for young professionals that are worried about balancing work and their careers, but yet at the same time feeling a desire to get involved in community leadership?
You know, that's very, very important, and I think it's a distinct challenge, and I go back to this social media issue, you know. As we move forward and we attract younger people in the industry and business, they've got to really have a balanced approach to life. I can't say that I did that in my career. Work was always a priority, and I changed that structure a number of years ago, which has worked a lot better, I must say. But attracting young people and getting them involved early on, not only in the business, but also in the community.
Yeah, it's a big part of growth and development, and it takes a lot of time and energy to volunteer, to get into the community, to make our place much better, and we certainly appreciate you staying involved with One Acadiana to that level. What I'd like to do is switch it up a little bit here and turn to leadership and management. When you consider your whole career with PHI, what would you say are the successes that you're most proud of?
Well, I think as far as the company is concerned, is being able to, one, you have to understand the environment. So when I walked in the door, it's really anything that I've been successful in is because I had good people around me. And when I walked in the door at PHI, it was, let's call it a unique culture. It wasn't a thought process culture. It was, look, this is how you do it. We don't want to change it. And if you do, you got a problem. And it was pretty shocking then. So trying to reverse that, which I think we have done completely, and taking the time to stop and talk to people at all levels of our company, and for management to take the time to say, okay, what's bothering you today? You know, it's really an important part of turning it, and I think we've turned it. We've got a great group of employees who are dedicated and focused not only on improving the company, but improving the area.
So for those of you who may not be aware of it, Al is a USL grad, and in getting to know Al a little bit closer, he told a story that I'm going to ask him to talk about this evening about a UL professor who explains the whole picture theory. Very interesting to see how Al applies this to his business and his life and leading his company. Tell us a little bit about the whole picture theory.
So I had a professor here, his name was Dr. Turner, and he was an economics professor. And everybody thought he was a little goofy, but he was very, very intelligent. He had some stress on the common sense side, but he focused on one thing that he constantly drew on the blackboard in making an economic decision, and that's the whole picture. So he draw this circle, and basically it's cause and effect. So it's burned in the back of my brain, I can tell you. So, and we have some of the team here today, and they can tell you, they may give me a problem, and I may tell them, well, I'll give you an answer tomorrow. Well, what I'm doing is thinking about the cause and effect of that decision. Because when you're doing that, you're making a decision in a lot of cases that are affecting, let's say you have 3,000 employees. Well, you're affecting times 5 when you make that decision, because when you include the families. So it was something at the time that, man, you got an A if you drew it on the test, I can promise you. Learn that right off. But it's something that was really burned in the back of my head, and I've been able to use it throughout my business career.
So Al, you've been in the workforce for many years, and you probably could have had the opportunity well before now to, hit the retirement circuit and give it up. What keeps you motivated and excited about staying in the game and keeping up after it?
Well, it's important to me, and I tell my kids, grandkids, people I work with all the time, find something you enjoy doing and it's not work. So for the last quite a few years of my career, I've been doing things that I enjoy. So I get up in the morning looking forward to going to work. Now one day when I get up and that isn't the case, I may be doing something else. But it's important to remain active, to challenge your mind, and really enjoy what you're doing. And I remember giving a talk in Morgan City for a graduating class. I don't do a lot of these things, but a friend of mine insisted I come. And I had something put together, and then I realized looking around the room, no, I'm going to walk around the room and talk to the students. And it was interesting to see, and I reminded them in closing remarks, I said, look, find something you like to do. It's not about money. If you're going to be successful in life, find something you enjoy doing. So about 10 of the parents came to me after the deal and thanked me because all the kids are getting pressure from their peers saying, you're not going to make any money doing that. But that's really not important. So if you pick out the successful people in life, they like what they're doing. Pretty simple.
So running big organizations, complex organizations, sooner or later we all deal with some form of disappointment or perhaps even failure. Can you tell us about a time when you feel like you were knocked down, and what did you do to pick yourself back up?
Well, in cycles in this business, there's been some pretty low points. And in my particular case, Don and I were talking about that at the office, and I told him I'd be happy to share it. But in the mid-'80s, as y'all well know, this was a ghost town. And financially, I was so far underwater, it wasn't funny. But I had a son, my oldest son was going through drug and alcohol rehab. And I'd go to the family sessions with him. And the second level session was out of Jackson, Mississippi. And I just left the session. I was driving back to the hotel, and it was a spring day. Some of the bankers in the organization, in the group today, might not like this comment, but so I'm driving back to the hotel, and I'm thinking, I'm not paying attention, because what works in AA works in life. It's one day at a time. Okay, yesterday's gone. Can't do anything about it. Tomorrow's not here yet. You focus on the day. So I'm driving back to the hotel, and I'm thinking, what the hell am I worried about? I owe them all that money. They don't owe me the money. So I'm going to go to them next week and say, here's what we're going to do. If not, I'm filing bankruptcy. So that's what I did. But I always tell my son, who February 3rd of this year will be sober 28 years, that he's got a bigger challenge than I have. You know, and I always thank him, because you can use that point in life, you know. We can only do the best today. And that's what I try and pass on to the people I work with at PHI. Focus on the day. Forget about yesterday. I don't even want to know about it. What can we do today to plan for tomorrow? You know?
One of the interesting things that I learned about Al in our discussions was, you know, what keeps him grounded. And he said it several times: faith, family, and fortune. Talk to us about that grounding in your life.
Well, that occurred about that time. So whenever I get those out of order, I create a problem for myself. Mm-hmm. So people ask me, I remember a banker asking me, how'd you survive the mid-'80s? Prayer and hard work, period. You know. So whenever I get that out of line, I got a problem.
Well said, well said. So what do you think is the most surprising thing that you've learned as yourself as a leader? I'm sure when you were back in college, you may not have thought that far ahead of yourself as being a leader and a leader in the community and being responsible for so many employees and their families. And it is a big responsibility. What is one surprising thing that you've learned about yourself during that time?
Well, you know, really, education is important, and don't take this wrong. I support education. But what I've learned and what I try and say to people all the time, look, in life, in my experience, the A students usually work for the C students. And I'm a C student, okay? And someone asked me the question, well, Dr. Savoy asked me the question one day, why was it that way for you? Because I had to work twice as hard as everybody else, you know? So if things come easy, and it wasn't easy for me, I can assure you. But again, what assisted me is good common sense.
Absolutely. So we've talked about your leadership history. What do you believe is one of the characteristics that every leader should possess, particularly those young people coming up in today's business climate?
Well, the most important part is humility and be willing to listen, okay? And willing to learn, you know. Listening to older people have kept me out of trouble for years. And listening to people with experience have kept me out of trouble, which I consistently do now.
So we've got some young managers with us here today, and some folks, no doubt, that are going to be probably sitting in your seat at some day in the future or with similar companies. What management advice would you have given to those in that 20-something type period of time for them for the future? And were there any lessons that you learned that you'd like to share with these young people?
Well, again, I think throughout the conversation, we've picked up the major points. And that's what I've tried to share with the people that I work with.
So walk us through your leadership team and how you tackle as a team big decisions.
Well, you know, we've got a group that works through the process, and they bring the final thought, and I sit down and look at it. And because of my particular position in the company and having voting control, then I can usually make a timely decision. But I depend on them to, one, vet everything and give me their suggestion. And sometimes I agree, sometimes I disagree.
So in your humility, you probably didn't want to say it, but I'm going to say it. He quoted in our session, it's not about me, but we, right?
Exactly.
And I thought that was so powerful to learn as a leader, that Al will take the time to listen carefully to his leadership team and weigh heavily their thoughts in the final decision as a group to make sure that it's well thought out.
Now, sometimes they may not think so.
Yeah, then you use your voting power to make sure that it's taken care of.
Sure.
So what has been the most pivotal moment in your career thus far?
Oh, that's pretty broad. There have been a lot of highs and lows, but like I say every day, and most people around me, when they ask me, how you doing today, I'm blessed. I've been fortunate. I've worked in things I enjoyed, and I attribute the success to a lot of the tools we talked about this morning.
So if you were hypothetically leaving your job tomorrow, what advice would you have for your successor?
Don't call me. You've been trained, don't call me.
So obviously you've been working that successor and been sharing the day-to-day training aspects of running the organization, and not many key leaders in business today plan for that hit by the bus type event, or the day that you decide, you know what, I'm giving it up. Talk a little bit about planning for the future and securing a business with the right successor.
Well, it's very important because you have that obligation not only to your successor, but to every employee and every family that works for you. You can't leave a company or a situation that would be distressed. And like when I walked into PHI, everybody assumed the Suggs family were owners. Well, they merely had voting control, and they ran it like a family business. And they didn't have an effective successor, which in turn impacted a lot of people. And I have to tell people constantly, look, I'm not the owner. I merely have voting control. I'm a stockholder. So that's a very important situation, and you got to be able to walk away from something and understand that you've trained the people that can do the job, you know?
So running a business and being faced with tough business decisions, can you give us an example of wrestling with a tough decision and how, you know, you made your way through it, and possibly if you had to do it over again, would you do it any differently?
Well, you can always have decisions that maybe don't turn out like you thought they would, and you have reservations on them. But look, when you make a decision, you've got to execute. And if you don't have enough confidence in your decision, then you got a problem. So no, I can honestly say I've never been in it.
So how do you encourage your leadership at PHI, and how do you decide who gets promoted and moves up into the organization?
Well, really, you want to put that on the people you have under you as part of your management team. It's their responsibility to select people. And again, my input is to look at who's being selected, the background, interview them maybe. Maybe I'll interview them, maybe I won't. And that's why in the upper level interviews I get involved, because we've quite frankly had a problem attracting the right people to move to Lafayette. And the biggest impediment in all that has been education. Where am I going to send my kids to school? And once they are in the area and look at it, the only alternative for them in most cases, because like we pulled in 2 people from Houston, very qualified people, doing a great job. That's very difficult to do. And the issue is the education of their kids. That was the biggest thing. And in both cases, they'll be going to private schools. And it shouldn't be that way. So for PHI to grow to the next level, we got to have support in that area, in this area.
Absolutely, absolutely. So looking at an organization that services the oil and gas industry, can you talk about what does the future of the oil and gas industry have for us, and what do you see are some opportunities that face our nation, particularly becoming independent on foreign nations for our energy?
Well, you know, there's so much geopolitical impact on the business right now. But if we work off of what's called stored inventory now, I think we'll see consistent pricing this year in the $60, $70 range. And what these companies have discovered, a lot of it they've taken off the back of service companies. In their purported efficiencies, you know, historically, they look to us to get their efficiencies before they work on themselves. You know, I had a conversation with an executive in a large oil company a while back and informed him that he would be better off if he let go 2/3 of the people in the building we were in, you know, and that would be his portion of becoming efficient. And the funny thing about it, he agreed. So what happens in these situations, it puts a lot of stress on the area, on the industry. Lafayette, relative to oil and gas, is a service location for deep water. If you look at all the facilities that have been built in the area, deep water has a very long life. It's not dead. They've figured out now, because of their economies, they can make money at $40 a barrel. Well, an individual well in deep water like a tieback BP just did, 25,000 barrels a day. That's a keeper. So you got a 40-year life in deep water, or maybe even longer because of technology. And this is going to impact this area because it's the only central area that people are interested in living in. But with that, we got to work on education.
Absolutely.
You know, we got to ramp up that. So as this turns around, you're going to see more activity again. But you have to be prepared for the down cycle because it'll come. I promise you. And when that price impacts, it impacts activity.
Al, I know that you're not a political person, but the question I'm sure lurks in everyone's mind about our current political environment nationally, the business climate that we're in right now, the economic feel-good, possibly environment that is going on. Do you have any thoughts or opinions about what's happening to us as a nation right now?
I probably have too many, but you know, when you look at the direction of the country, and you know, I like many people in business talk to a lot of politicians, and you have the sincere ones, and you have the ones that tell you whatever you want to hear. But it's a shame as a country, none of these guys are working together. And the Republican elite are just as bad as the Democratic elite. So quite frankly, early on, I supported Trump. And the reason I did was concern for my kids and grandkids. And we needed somebody in here, I felt, that turned the whole thing upside down. And he's done that. So we have a tax package that's been done. There's other things. We need to control immigration. There's no country in the world, and I've been to a lot of them, that you can go in without a defined visa. If you overstay your visa, they're going to fine you, except here. And there's no country in the world that allows you to come in pregnant, have a child, and the child's an American citizen. So why do you think they come here? They come here in droves. They wait and get that passport. because that's a ticket for them back in someday. Then they go back home. We see it too often. Those are the kind of things that we need to change because it's going to impact us long term. And the business environment, you've seen the difference in the business environment. And I can tell you the regulations that Obama put on for oil companies and other industries during his term by executive order that Trump has reversed, because I talked to a lot of people in different businesses, it's had a tremendous effect. And it's had a tremendous positive effect on the oil and gas industry. So we would hope that people would be willing to work together. I don't have a lot of hope for that, unfortunately, because everybody's got an agenda. And certainly foreign aid, which is in the picture here recently, UN budget, we're cutting fund in the UN. Agree with that totally. I've seen the misuse of foreign aid around the world, and it's really stupid to continue it. And you go to Washington, and every third world country has an embassy in Washington. So why is that the case? Because they got lobbyists trying to get money out of the U.S. in all these programs. So, and this is going to impact everybody in this room and their kids and their grandkids. And that's what we're dealing with right now. And now's the time to change it. So I have pretty strong opinions in those areas.
Obviously so. So in a few minutes, we're going to open up the discussion for questions from our audience. So be thinking about some of the things that you would like to ask Al personally, and we'll reach out to you. But right now, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring it to a close of questioning and ask Al to reflect back on his early childhood and upbringing and talk to us about the impact that had on you as a man today leading an organization as well known as PHI.
Well, I was blessed. I'm from New Iberia. And when I was about 11, we moved to Houma because my dad worked for Texaco. But they were simple people, my mother and father. No bias at all. There was never a biased discussion in our household. And when I look back on the whole process, and as my father always said, when you leave this earth, the only thing you have is your reputation. And that was factual, and is factual. So sometimes it's hard for me to understand people, but really people are a product of their environment. And in my case, I came from a very balanced environment. We didn't have a lot, but it was very balanced.
Wow, this has been a fantastic discussion, and I'd like to now take the opportunity to see if we have any questions directly for Al.
Yes, sir.
Whoop.
Forgot about this.
You're connected.
Mr. Gonsoulin, Andre Como, Regions Insurance. You mentioned education as a hurdle, and you gave the example of folks in Houston. Can you tell us, what is it that they were leaving in Houston and didn't find here? Was it the structures? Was it the scores? Was it trauma in the political environment of the school system? Thank you.
I live in Texas, and I have grandkids that go to public school and Catholic school in Texas. And I remember when I went into Texas, and the difference in the school system they had here is just absolutely night and day. And the reason it's that way is the tax base. So in Texas, half of your property tax is dedicated to the school system. So consequently, you find higher paid teachers, better facilities, better programs. And quite frankly, I was shocked. And what we're going to have to do in Louisiana, and I say we because I'm a part of the state. I put a lot of time and effort in here. I'm from here. And a simple example of that is one day when my parents were up in age, I was taking care of them. They lived in New Iberia. I moved them back from Houma to New Iberia. And I was in my study and I was writing a check for my father's property taxes. And I was shaking my head. My wife said, well, what's the matter? I said, look, it's obscene what they paid property taxes because the state needs education. So until people get to the point in the state, and of course, there's a lot of distrust in the system in the state, to be willing to commit to a portion of those taxes going direct into a system, a school system, it's not going to change. So when you go to Texas, I mean, the facilities in every high school, every elementary, every middle school will just blow you away. It's kind of like the public school that my son's here and his kids go to. And I was out at a football practice, you know, and I was making a comment to my grandson after the practice. I was taking him home. I said, Zachary, I remember practicing on a mud hole, okay? And our playing field wasn't much better. But here you are, your practice field is AstroTurf, you know? But that's the kind of facilities they have, and that's the kind of systems they have. And I have to compare so you understand. That's where you need to be. And the only way you're going to get there is restructure that tax base and make sure taxes are directed into the school system to where you can pay teachers properly, to where you can have the right facilities. Because I know in one discussion we had one at Acadiana, I was stunned when Herbie Schilling said, geez, those temporary buildings we talking about, I remember when they first put them in when I was graduating from Lafayette High. I said, man, are you kidding me? So those are the kind of things, and we really need to affect it, and everybody needs to get involved. And don't be offended, because remember, it's your kids, it's your grandkids, it's their kids, it's all about future and where do you want to be in Louisiana.
Any other questions? Yeah, hang on one second.
Mr. Gonsoulin, you talked about the effects that changes the president made, how they'll affect the oil and gas industry. How do you think that's going to affect the rest of the Lafayette services? This community is big service-oriented community as well due to the support for oil and gas. Is that starting to affect you guys now?
Well, it's already affected the companies because, and I had a conversation with the Secretary of Interior a couple of weeks ago, Zinke. He put the right guy into Bessie, which is Scott Angel. Most of you people know Scott. You know, he knows the industry, he knows the people, he has a background, and that's really what we need. So, and then Trump, because all these onerous regulations were put on by executive order. So he's been able to reverse that. So in conversations with all companies, it's already had an impact because the excessive regulations drove their cost, and they had a project that was uneconomical. Now it's economical.
Good point. Other questions? Comments?
Al, when you purchased your interest in PHI, you recently, I think, sold a marine company.
Right.
And so you've never been in the aviation business before, and you were at the age that many people consider retirement. What motivated you to invest in a business like PHI at that age and work on it the last, 17 years?
That's a hard question to answer. I've always been a pilot. I still fly for pleasure. So I'm very familiar with the aviation side. Wasn't familiar with the helicopter business, but you know, basically every business has the mechanics. However, it's a very challenging business. It's high capital cost, extreme safety profile, not a lot of non-prudent competitors that don't understand the market dynamics of pricing and getting a proper return. So every now and then my wife asks me the same question.
All right. Yeah.
Scott says, curious, in a company like DHI, you're doing work all around the world. As you kind of compare and contrast doing work in other places versus doing work in Louisiana, I'm curious to know, you mentioned the workforce, being strong here, but maybe kind of compare and contrast, what's it like to do business here versus some of those other places?
Well, in every area you go in, you have a different workforce. And in that mix is the culture of the area. So it's really important that you understand the culture and you're working with the right people in that process that's able to handle it. And as an example, we had an air medical contract in Saudi Arabia that we completed last year, and due to their budgets, they've delayed the extension of that contract. But listen, it's a whole different world. So you have to educate people that you put in that environment that maybe come from this environment or other areas of, look, you have to be attuned to the culture. We have a project in Australia. It's with a Japanese company. David will appreciate this. It's very important that you understand the culture when you walk in the room to deal with them, because you can quickly offend your customer. So that's going to change in any area you work in,
Next question. Well, I'd like to take this time to acknowledge a couple of staff members that Al brought along with him. His business development leader, David,
Dave Stepanek,
and his executive assistant, Anna.
and CFO Trudy McConaughey.
Thank you. You guys are certainly working with an inspiring leader. And Al, thank you for your contributions to One Acadiana, and most importantly, to Acadiana, the community. It's very important to have people dedicated to community like you are. Thank you again.
Well, I appreciate it.